Hi, and welcome to the Future of Development podcast. My name's Anthony Amunategui, and I'm here to inspire people to find amazing careers in the construction development world. If you like our podcast, please make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. If you really like our podcast, make sure you hit the little bell. Rahul, welcome to the show. Excited about having you on. Our pre-show was a lot of fun, so excited about going through our conversation today.
Super excited to be here. Thank you.
You know, as we get into the idea of taking CO2 and introduce it, how did you come up with this? I mean, first of all, where did you guys come up with this idea, and how did all that start?
Yeah, so this the stuff we're doing now is the brainchild of Gaurav Sant, who's a professor at UCLA. Today, he runs the Institute for Carbon Management, which is a research institute with a whole bunch of things in its bailiwick. But this was an idea that he first had in kind of 2013 timeframe. So, like a lot of things do in academia, you know, this started with an idea he had, one of his colleagues telling him it couldn't be done, and then, you know, starting with sort of thimble-sized experiments on a lab bench, and slowly as experiments failed, they redirected and then worked, sort of scaling up slowly over time, and in time getting the support from private foundations, the Department of Energy, scaling that up, continuing to push the technology. And I only discovered it in 2020 when I was wrapping up a year of investing personal capital, and concrete was one of those areas that I was excited about. I hadn't found something that checked the boxes I was looking for, and he and I met. We hit it off, and so then I was exposed to this journey that he and the team had been on for 6 or 7 years. And needless to say, I'm here now running it. So that tells you, how I felt about it, how he felt about me, and about the partnership that we formed.
A lot of times that's key, right? I talk to entrepreneurs all the time, or even inventors, and the hardest part is their great job at creating something, the ideas, the formulation, the study of something, but what they lack is doing what you guys did, right? Finding a partner that can help grow a business, right? There's one thing about creating, a product or, an idea. It's a whole nother thing to grow a company, right? There are two different skill sets. There's a whole different mentality, under the guidelines of creating, the scientific part of it's great, but the other parts of hiring people and budgets and forecasts and sales and all the stuff it takes to grow a company, it's another one, right? So finding a good partner, I think is a pretty big deal.
No, it's huge. And I credit Gaurav with having the wisdom to sort of understand that. He's certainly getting, great advice from some mentors, older professors at UCLA or other people in his orbit on mistakes they've made, things that have worked well for them. And a lot of us get good advice on lots of things, right? But sometimes it's hard to fight human nature and take that into to actually have it change the way we act. I mean, that happens to me all the time as a parent, but so it's nice to see. That was nice to see. And I think the other thing that influenced this is that, unlike a lot of academics, Gaurav comes from a construction family. So his father and grandfather ran construction companies in India, and so he grew up around construction sites, right? So he had a fork in the road at some point. It was either head off into the more academic world, or become the third generation person running this business. And he took one fork in that road, but it's having enough understanding of all the aspects of these businesses, and both understanding what pieces of that you like and can do well and what pieces you don't, is key. And I've tried to partner with technical co-founders, founders over the years that are both, really good in their area, sufficiently broad in other areas, but also willing to accept that they're not great at everything. And so found that in Gaurav, and it's obviously early in our journey, but so far so good on that front.
It takes a lot. I've looked back over my career, and CDO Group I've had for 25 years, and there was a fork in a road when I made some changes. Right, first, a lot of those were about me. Right, first was personal growth, and one of the biggest parts of it, not just the stuff you do to be healthier, the stuff you do to be in better shape physically, but the stuff you do better shape to be mentally. Right, I mean, bringing in some coaches to support my growth. It took a lot, right? It took a lot to get humble enough to know that, because a lot of what as a creator of a company, a lot of what I had was built on my back, right? And my fear of losing it every day is what drove me, right? There was a lot of that drive that woke me up every single day and drove me. And now to let go of that, and these business coaches would come in and they'd sit down with me and go, look, you need to, you've hired these amazing people. And I tell a story all the time about the coach. She walks in my office and she locks my door. I'm like, well, why are you locking my door? And she goes, I need to lock, keep your door locked, and I need you to stay on this side of it. I'm locking you in, not locking them out. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, why? She goes, look, you're great. You've built this amazing company. You've hired these amazing people. Now let them do what they do. And that was such a gift to me, right? It was hard. When I say gift, I mean gift in that having the gumption or the ability to sit there and bite my tongue, and on the days when I wanted to run out and save the world and fix all the problems they had. Great, because like a parent, right? Like we do it as parents every day. I want my kids not to feel any pain, but letting them become their own, and kind of grow into their own skin and figure out some of the bumps and figure out their own stuff, right? Figure it out a little bit. It's very similar.
Absolutely.
I going through that with the kids, I feel like that's an ultimate gift to give them, is that gift of, all right, now we're going to get to a point where ultimately my job is to keep you from dying, right? I got you. I'm getting you through the heavy load of that. Now you're going to go through learning about that. With 5 kids, I assumed that one of them would want to come to the company and start running the company that I created. Like, I created this company. Now my kids will come. I'll honor you. And they've kind of taken their own path. Maybe one of them might, but they've gone on their own path, and I got to honor that as well, right? That's a tough one.
No, absolutely. And I'm not in that situation, but I'm not too far removed from it. I mean, I think you speak about mentors and that drive. Certainly a lot of what's influenced my DNA is growing up with parents who were immigrants from India as well, and watching them jump out of their first roles as engineers in larger companies, or sort of doing the predictable things, and jump into entrepreneurship in fields that weren't very traditional for them. So in their case, they started a financial planning business that's been really successful, and have run it into their mid 70s. So reflecting on that journey from watching them do that at an age where that success was not guaranteed by any means, right? Has been a key piece. And then just the piece you said about letting people go and letting them run. There's also obviously for kids, there's one. I think this is one I found in this venture for me. I think I mentioned earlier, I'm not a construction person or building materials person. I come at this from the lens of running small companies with new technology, putting teams together, and trying to work at a pace and do things that is hard to do in bigger companies. But most of that has been on the energy side, right, or healthcare side. So in this case, one of the great things we've been able to do is hire some people in who are both amazing in their fields, but also just great people. And I will say the freedom, the mental freedom that comes from having that has been a game changer for me relative to my last couple of startups, where I might have been the only business person surrounded by a bunch of technical people, and there's a lot of there's plenty of gray hairs and scars that have come from that. So trying to not make the same mistakes twice, right? Just make new ones.
It's great. You go through, you learn every time you do, when you go through this learning, and you finding, and also it's as much as learning is also some luck, right? Finding the right partners that kind of come in, the right people that kind of make that gel happen. I've grown lots of companies, and it's not always even when you try to go out and find the perfect person for the position. I hold myself accountable for finding great people. A lot of times it's finding people that aren't there yet and help growing them, right? I think I spend as much time growing the people that come on, because I've learned one thing. It's more about growing the people in the company that make the company, right? No matter where I go to find people, rarely do I find someone that's fully matured and developed enough to run what I need them to do. A lot of times it's about finding people that are close and have the right behaviors, and then we start to grow them, right? We start to really look on. One of the biggest things that I find is, if I grow the people that are here in the companies that I own, the companies grow, right? It's as much about their personal development, the stuff that we do with them, and helping them, transition through it. And I watch as they transition, the companies kind of go with it. Giving having good guidelines and systems in place, which I think that's where your expertise is, really having that piece that guides them. Now, how do you work with each individual so as they grow? We've got one of the guys here at CDO Group who was one of our VPs. That I remember when he started here, just his own personal development changed, right? Going from a construction guy to being a construction leader, to being a team leader, to being a group leader, right? To now be a VP of the company, and then watching, not just his knowledge of the business, but watching his health increase, his family life increase, right? He used to be a smoker, and I used to laugh at him, like, today he's a marathon runner, high energy output, right? But as his being changed, I thought that to me that feels like as important. And by the way, I had to go through the same thing, right? As I look at me and the way that I live, am I the example of that as a leader that encourages them to do the same thing? So as I do work on me, they do work on them. The company kind of grows, and it kind of trickles through the whole organization, and watching all that develop. I feel like that's a big part of developing an organization.
No, it's a great point. I mean, I think, to be frank, one of the tensions is one of the differences you have in even a medium-sized company, right, that's been around for 10 years versus a startup that's got 5 or 10 people, right, is there's a tension there. Let's be honest. It's we struggle with, we're at the stage where in some ways you're tempted to just only bring in people that can come in, hit the ground running, and you don't have to focus on development, because there's no spare capacity for that, right? I mean, we all envision that, getting to a point where even if once you've got 20, 30 people, you could start doing some of that. But it's a tension. I mean, I think any startup is in this situation where because if you're GE, right, where I started my career, you got plenty of opportunity and cycles with people to get them there, and the business is not going away, et cetera, right? We don't have that luxury, right? If we don't do the things we have slated for this year, we don't get that next round of funding, and then we're all looking for something else to do. So that's a tension, but that's one of the things that makes it interesting. So
ultimately, that's what you get paid for, right? At the end, that's what you get paid for in developing companies, is taking that young, restless group and guiding them through the toughest times, which is that making expectations. People that don't know how to work together, it takes a while for people to work together, right? That and not blame each other, not looking for why it's not working. It's got to be someone else's fault, right? As we work together and grow. I mean, I've got well-developed companies that still do that every day. And I look at myself and go, all right, this is another learning opportunity. So let's get into, I want to get into CarbonBuilt. And so this whole technology to me is neat, so let's break it down a little bit for the audience so they get to understand what we're doing. Is you're capturing CO2 emissions from plants and taking them and embedding them into materials and kind of storing that instead of polluting the world with it. Is that kind of the best way to?
At a high level. I mean, so let's take a step back and say, why would we even do this, right? So concrete is a magic material. It's hard to imagine what society would be like without it, right? The heart can't even fathom, really. But part of what drives that magic, I mean, the magic behind that is all the chemistry around cement and Portland cement in particular, which has become, it wasn't always like this, but that has evolved to become the most effective, most efficient binder system in concrete. And it's great, with one big exception. I mean, we could talk about cost, but really the big issue is that it's incredibly carbon intensive, right? And it's fine. That may have been fine decades ago and centuries ago, but we're obviously living in a world where that's causing real damage, and we've got to find a solution. And so that's the motivation here. And I think while that's been recognized for a while, the challenge in concrete is substitutes for Portland cement in concrete have either been very marginal in nature, right? We're making 1% difference, 2% difference, which isn't really enough. Cement and concrete make up about 8% of global CO2 emissions today, and that's going up as we get better at cars and electricity and efficiency. The things that are left are taking up a bigger and bigger share. And we look at what's happened in China the last 20 years, what's going to happen in India the next 20 years, and then Africa after that, right? People are going to keep moving to cities, buildings are going to keep getting built, and that's either going to happen in a way that's sustainable or not. And concrete is going to be fundamental to those structures all getting built. So the challenge with these sustainable concretes has been either they're marginal or they don't perform, which obviously that's table stakes, so that doesn't work, or they're expensive. And so there's lots of ways of making sustainable concrete where you double the price or triple the price, and this is a commodity, right? So in the end, that's not helpful. And so what struck me when I dug in on what Gaurav and his team at UCLA had was the first technology that had a very clean path and was already sufficiently mature to deliver big sustainability improvements through both removing Portland cement and replacing it with lower carbon materials, and through curing with carbon dioxide. So we'll get back to that. So that's the sustainability piece, but then doing it in a way that actually reduced costs, right? So you weren't forced to have a price premium. Obviously, performance I won't even talk about, because that's if you can't perform like concrete, it's not even worth having the conversation. To dig into that a bit, what we do, as I said, is we replace Portland cement, either most of it or all of it, with other materials that together have a lower carbon footprint in their production. Okay, so this is some combination of could be some other virgin materials. Some of them are also carbon intensive, but we're just using less of it, combined with more waste materials, residues that would otherwise be going to the landfill. So in total, like I said, that material set has a lower. In order to bring those materials to the concrete plant, there was way less carbon involved and emitted than with conventional concrete. Okay, then those materials, if you just cured them the normal way concrete is cured, one, they wouldn't work. So we wouldn't even have this conversation. In order for them to work and deliver the strength that we need out of concrete and all the other properties, they have to be cured, and they are not cured with hydration the way Portland cement is. They are cured with CO2. So the CO2 reacts with the compounds in those materials to form calcium carbonates, and that's what delivers on the strength requirements. In doing that, we get uptake of CO2 into the product, right? The CO2 is absorbed, it's mineralized, so we're not storing it, like there's not little bubbles of CO2 encapsulated. It's transformed into and mineralized into carbonates, and therefore locked up, right? So it's both of these things, and together those deliver 70, 80, 90, could be 100% plus reductions in the carbon footprint. It all depends on what exact materials are available for that producer, and it determines where that number ends up sitting.
This to me is the, you're a cement manufacturer, right? You make the product. For sure, there is a need. There's all these other things that are coming at you, right? Every day I interview more and more ideas and more brands, and everybody says the same thing. Concrete's great, but it's polluting the world.
Yep.
Right. And they're all racing to say it's great, and the problem is that it's a low cost provider, and people are like, look, it's a very low cost product to do. But at some point, the cost on the world is going to outweigh it. And as concrete manufacturers can take the byproduct of the manufacturing and lower that, and find some ways to lower the impact on the environment, and still manufacture the low cost product, I believe it'll stay the front runner, right? You're exactly right in that.
It's the only way. It's the only way actually to make this happen. And I think, to me, it's the lessons I've taken from other commodities, whether it's electricity or fuels or chemicals, all apply. It's the same dynamics here, right? Unless we can make concrete more economically viable for the key people in the value chain, and then at least no worse for everyone else in the value chain, right? You're always going to be in this push-pull between, what's like, does my customer care? Are they willing to pay more? Is there a tax credit? That is no recipe for the pace of change that is required here, right? And so the model for us has been, and the reason I was enthusiastic about this was having a path to have producers. So we're in the business of, just to adjust one point you said, of providing a retrofit solution for concrete producers, right? Starting with the block producers, and we'll grow from there into other precast and then other pieces of the market. But we're starting with block producers. It's called roughly 10% of the overall market, which is, in a $10 million market, you don't care about the 10% one, but in a $1 trillion market, 10% is pretty nice as a place to start. So,
it's worldwide. I mean, literally, these plants are around the world.
Totally, and they're making them the same way. It's basically the same, right? So with the service we provide is, we're going to give you a piece of kit. We're going to co-invest with you in that kit to retrofit what you do. We're going to give you the recipe to order new materials than you were otherwise going to do. We're going to set you up with all those suppliers. We're going to co-invest with you in all that, make it happen. And then we will share in the margin expansion that results. And the margin expansion is a combination of cost reduction and carbon revenue that we get because third parties, people who aren't taking title, they're not buying the block, they're not using the block, they're interested in paying for high quality, permanent storage, verified carbon removal, and even the reduction we're making in cement usage is monetizable, right? And that's all new. I've been on this kind of journey for 20 years. This is the first time in the last year and a half where people are stepping up and actually paying, volunteering, right? Not because the government's telling them they have to. There's not a carbon tax or anything. The companies are volunteering in their drive to go net zero, go carbon negative, to wipe out all their historical emissions. They are paying cash. They're pre-purchasing for technologies that are still being developed. And it's amazing. And what that allows us to do is sort of funnel some of this energy and frankly, dollars from these companies, right? They're the tech behemoths into concrete producers who are uniquely positioned to demonstrate permanent storage and verified removal. So it's a whole new stream, right? Who would have thought, if you've been in the concrete production business for decades or a century, some of these companies we're partnering with have been, it's 5 generations, right, of their family have been it. And the issue you were talking about earlier, right? Kids don't want to go into business in part because of this issue, right? It's a low margin business and it's front and center in terms of polluting. Well, what if we flip that around and make it a medium or high margin business and the product is carbon neutral, right? Maybe you have a different feeling when you get up in the morning and your kids get up in the morning and feel, about taking this business over. So that's the idea. And our view is if we can get producers to just because they're capitalists, switch over and start doing this, that's the engine that's going to make this scale quickly.
It's by far the easiest thing to see. If you're a manufacturer and you're going, look, I can now be in business, and all the people, it's kind of like the oil producers, right? The guys that are out there doing oil, and electric's coming out here, and they just haven't changed. They keep saying, well, if I keep doing this way, the electric, vehicles that are coming at it are making so much more sense, because oil has never changed. It's never evolved. It keeps staying where it's at. And the world's going, hey, look, I know it's more expensive for electricity today, but as that gets, they've implemented it, and now that those prices are coming down, the oil producers have got to be looking at going, ugh. Now look, the same thing's going to happen with the concrete producers. If they're not looking at the world and going, look, today we are the low cost provider. We've got this amazing material that the world wants to use. It's easy to expand on. But as the other ideas that are coming, if the plants aren't evolving and starting to become less impactful on the world, that same thing's going to happen to them, right? They're going to become the dinosaurs, no matter where they're at. Even if they're a low-cost provider, the other ideas will start to grow so fast and start to look at the material sciences of it. You're now looking at it going, all right, look, we're going to continue doing where you're at. It's an easy product to start to implement. And these aren't impacts to them. I mean, to these plants, the incremental cost of impact to adding on your kit, is got to be marginal at best, nebulous at best.
Yeah, the way I would look at it is a typical block plant, for example, right, is the total capex. If for one of these, if you look at the investment that's gone in, $10 to $15 million, and what we're talking about is about a 10% increase on that. So it's not zero, and it's not, this isn't software, right? I'm a firm believer that, CO2 is created because of infrastructure. You can't solve all these problems without infrastructure change. So there's CapEx. The trick in all this is finding the places where that CapEx is less, and we can get started and moving, right? And so so there's CapEx, but it's not, we're not doubling or adding 50% to the cost of the plant. It's $1 million to $2 million to make these retrofits. We help with that, right? We're living in a time, you talked about luck earlier. A key piece of luck, I think, in this space is timing. And I've lived, since I've been doing this kind of work for 20 years, I've half of that has been spent, more than half, in the days where no one cared, right? There was no money for this stuff. Everyone had fresh wounds from the last clean tech boom and bust cycle, and no one was investing in anything. And just like, certainly in the construction market, right? You live and breathe this. There's cycles, and today, thankfully, we're in a time where awareness is high. There's a lot of capital ready to invest in good ideas, whether it's funding people or CapEx, or whether it's debt or equity. And so capital is not the biggest challenge. It's that you have good ideas that can realistically drive scale on carbon impact. And so now we want the producers to have skin in the game, right? So we're, while you could conceive of models where, hey, we take all the risk and put all this, and maybe we'll do that at some point, but part of our thinking right now is that we want the key parties to have skin in the game and to be able to be very aligned incentive-wise. And so, this is the model we're taking for getting the first few plants up and running. I think once you have those first few plants up and running, debt finance is going to bring a huge lever that we have to increase growth here, but obviously, a little harder with your first plant. So we announced, since the time we set this discussion up and we're having it, we announced yesterday that we'll be putting up our first retrofit in about an hour outside of Birmingham in Alabama with a producer that we've been working with on the development side for a number of years. So we've gotten to know him quite well, and he's had the benefit of seeing the technology in his plant, of seeing the blocks we produced in our pilot demonstrations sitting in his, outside his office door. And so he has a level, he understands how it works, why it works, and all the questions one might have as a skeptic. He's erased because he's seen the product. And so we're starting work on that. We've started already, actually, and aiming to get that having block flowing off of his line in Q1 of next year. So
congratulations, first of all. That's a great feat, getting that crossing that hurdle. And so as you start to work with now, are you first starting with just the CO2 finish, the CO2 curing process? Is that where you're starting with them?
Well, the two go hand in hand. So you can't separate the CO2 curing from the change in materials. You need both of those to happen in order to get the product to function like concrete. So we're doing both. We're changing his material set and implementing the CO2 curing. The CO2 in this case, and this is one of the puzzles we needed to solve, is where's the CO2 coming from? Is in this case will be coming from forestry residues, so waste biomass, which we will be combusting on site. So we're putting in a boiler. This is all old technology off the shelf, and most people get these boilers to get hot water or hot air in cold climates, right? Think Scandinavia or Canada. We're actually doing it to get sort of renewable CO2 processed on site. One of the benefits of doing that is we can, this plant traditionally uses natural gas for steam generation, and in doing that for other purposes on site, we can shut off the use of natural gas. This is this is Alabama, so forestry residues are aplenty, and so it's an inexpensive, renewable way of getting CO2. But we are, one of the hallmarks of our technology is that we have very flexible on CO2 options. So one of the things other than materials that has driven up the price or cost of competing technologies that also deliver high CO2 impact is they need very clean pressurized CO2 delivered at elevated temperatures, and every one of those is that's just cost. So the more you can use really waste streams, the less expensive that is, and we need it to be less expensive so we can match with this commodity benchmark we've got. And so the history of our technology was doing this with the view of locating concrete production near power plants, right? Coal plants, natural gas plants. So that's where a lot of our test work was done. The dilemma when you scale up is, one, those plants coal plants are going away. There are fewer of them, and they're far away from where concrete is used. And we don't solve their CO2 problems. You make so much CO2 there, you're not going to turn all that CO2 into concrete, and then you have a mountain of concrete that's far away from where it's needed. So we really flipped that after I came on board to say, okay, we've got to solve for this at the concrete plants, and we've got to figure out a way to get CO2 to them inexpensively. And so there's really only three options. If you have flue gas nearby because you're located in an industrial area and you've got a manufacturing plant next door, great. Like we can use that. That's always going to be the cheapest option. If you make bricks, for example, if you got a brick kiln nearby, that's going to put out enough CO2 usually. So there's options there if you have that kind of emitter. That's not a lot of the marketplace, right? So in most cases, biomass is going to be our solution today. But then the other one that's emerging, and we're certainly not there yet, but I think if you look back over the last quarter, you see an intense amount of investment going into direct air capture technologies, right? These are solutions that can pull CO2 out of the air where it's in at 400 plus ppm, but very low levels, and turn it into more concentrated streams. This is a really hard technical and economic problem. So don't get me wrong, I don't think anyone's figured this out yet. But as that technology matures, we'll be able to make use of it because we're turning it into something that generates cash, as opposed to just trying to store it underground, which is a cost, right? We'll be able to make use of it as it comes down the cost curve. And so that's certainly where our vision is in the long term, is that you have modular direct air capture units that are providing the CO2, and then we're turning that into concrete. But until that, until those companies and technologies are ready, biomass makes a great solution for places where we don't have an industrial emitter nearby.
Those are all like little experiments you go through, right? You look at where you put the plants, the type of plants, the bio, doing this bio, say it again, bio.
Well, it's biomass based CO2. So, I mean, think of it, the real simple way to think about it is, you have forestry operations that are happening already. There's lots of waste from those operations. That is, much of it is chipped today and either disposed of, right, or turned into products, and we can tap into that stream. And so, you can think of it as that is material that will, in a number of years, will degrade and decompose and release CO2. We're accelerating that decomposition by burning it. But instead of letting it out in the atmosphere, we're capturing it and putting it into the concrete.
Got it. So you're taking it, you're burning it. Now, the stuff that you're burning, the output of the heat that's generated from there, you're using
exactly. So we're getting heat or hot water, which we can use in the plant and substitute things that they were otherwise burning natural gas to get. Plus we get the CO2, which we're using for our process. Normally, these guys wouldn't care about CO2. That's the waste from the machines that we're using. But in our case, we want the CO2, right? We're using it. It's fundamental to our process.
Are you taking? Have you guys started using any of the ash from the burn of the wood?
We will be doing that. It's a pretty small part of what we need overall, so it doesn't meaningfully change the overall materials balance. But we will certainly use that. Yeah, we're trying to be as we won't be sending that to disposal. So but using fly ash and broadening the type of fly ash we can use. I think many of your audience will be familiar that the introduction of the concrete industry has had very few innovations in the last few decades, right? There's two things that have, I would say, so Mike quibble with me on this, but I think there's two things that have changed big time if you look at the material set in concrete, right? One is fly ash and the introduction of more waste materials into concrete, and the other is admixtures, right? The chemistry. On the fly ash side, they've been, while it has certainly transformed that industry, like what happens to fly ash produced out of coal plants, it's still a very small fraction of what's in concrete, right? It's again on the margins of cement reduction and carbon impact. And there's a lot of fly ash that cannot be used in concrete, so sort of off spec, doesn't meet the specs for inclusion, and that's been stored in there's huge landfills. We got billions of tons of this stuff sitting around, and sometimes you get these, you get leaks. You don't have to Google too far to see some of the bad things that have happened because all this stuff's sitting around, right? What if you could, you had a process that was more amenable, had a wider scope for taking in off-spec fly ash, and we can start using some of this stuff. And so that's part of what our process can do is make better use of off-spec fly ash. And so it's not the main selling point. I mean, I think fundamentally we're driven by climate and carbon, but if along the way we can help with waste reduction, that's certainly a good thing.
As you go through this, it's such a big conversation, right? This is not a small idea. This is really changing the world, right? This is the kind of stuff that as we master this and really, find ways to take waste products from one area and implement them into other products, and the byproducts of it actually make a better product and a less, it changes the carbon footprint of the world. There's a lot there, and you're in the middle of a startup company. On your day-to-day basis, how do you go through and figure out where the priorities are? What's the North Star that kind of guides everybody to what they're doing today and every day as they go through it?
It's a great question. I mean, so we, and I think part of this builds on, some of my lessons and from past ventures, and there's a tension in trying to think about process, to how much process at what points in a company's evolution. But one thing we did deliberately here, as soon as we had our leadership team assembled kind of in Q4 of last year, middle of Q4, was spend some time thinking about vision and mission. And these exercises can be trite, and everyone's seen them a million times, but that has certainly served us well to have everyone focused on the same thing. And for us, the mission is all about enabling the concrete industry to deliver large scale carbon removal, right? And there's I think we add on to that sort of through the utilization of CO2 and other industrial waste, but it's really about that first piece, right? Enabling the concrete industry to do something meaningful. And this, for us, we'll talk about what that means magnitude wise, but there's a lot embedded in there, right? To enable them to do that, it has to be profitable, right? To be able to make that happen at scale. So that's kind of the North Star, but then it boils down to what are our objectives for this year? And so building off of that, I mean, we had a very deliberate exercise in spelling out everything we wanted to as a team get done this year. And we talk about that list every single week, right? Every time our leadership team is together, every time our team gets together, we are looking at that list and saying, what have we done? What's left to be done for the ones that are up for this month or this quarter? And I mean, frankly, at this stage of it, as it's very clear, one of those goals has way more importance than the rest of them, and that is getting this first plant up and running, right? We could build all the internal processes we want, we can do all the other things but that one is the one that makes or breaks us as a company, and so it becomes the foundation. But we can't just do that, because we're trying to build a company and grow our portfolio. We've got things we're working on the development side. We've got a pipeline to build. We've got contracts to get executed on the carbon removal side. So all these other things need to happen as well. But I think everyone can connect vision, which our vision is all about a world where civilization can continue, standards of living can continue growing. We can help people improve their standards of living in India and Africa. Obviously, that's very personal to me. It's personal to Gaurav, who also comes from India. But so we can do that without compromising on the planet, right? So that's vision, right? We're a small piece of that. Mission is all around what we're doing in terms of enabling the concrete industry to make a dent and a meaningful dent, right? We're not going to do it all. So we cannot, concrete is not going to solve climate change. We have to get 40 gigatons of annual emissions out. There's lots of things that are already commercial today, the electric vehicle, your solar panel, your wind turbine, efficiency, all these things that we need to scale, but we need to do more than that. And concrete is positioned, concrete, if done, if the technologies we've got and others got can scale quickly, can be a meaningful contributor to that. We're talking 1, 2, 3, 4 gigatons. So that's the idea.
Well, I mean, there's a lot you said in that, and I tear it apart. But one of the ones that we'll just start with is, as all those other ideas come in, electric cars, all the stuff that we're doing in sustainability for all the other products that are out there, wind, solar, all that great stuff, it kind of makes, the concrete production emissions start to pop out a little bit more, right? That percentage of the world's impact gets a little bit louder, right? I mean, so it really does behoove the manufacturing groups to start looking at that today before that becomes a real eye opener. So that, people really start to stare at them, as the emissions that's impacting the world the most. And you travel the world. I love India, right? I to me, it's a sensory, a cultural, everything about it just radiates. So as they're growing, the speed by which they're growing at, it's amazing. And they're going to want, you can see, especially as our life expectancy changes, right? You can really see how our population on this planet is going to start to double, over the next couple of life cycles. Yeah, and that that impacts the world even more, right? The amount of production we have to do to support a doubling of a population. So it behooves the manufacturers today to really look at the product they're making and going, all right, look, even if it's just 1%, and the communities that support it, companies like you that help support the change of those plants, right? Understanding that if I help them change, they'll impact it. And also the communities that benefit from it. Hey, look, if I can give tax incentives, or if I can find ways to help them to find those resources to lower the impact, it's got to make sense holistically, right? The whole group benefits from each one of us taking another step forward in the impact that we have on our environment.
Absolutely. I think the real testament to me was when I attended the National Concrete Masonry Association's mid-year meeting last year. I think it was in July, right? Sustainability was barely touched on. I think one session somewhere, technical session. This year's annual meeting, 180 degrees, right? It was front and center at in every session, and so that's to me that's that tells the story more as much as anything else.
Yeah, it's fun. I listened to you as you grow your company, and like my spine has a little bit of a tingle, right? Knowing, the days when you sit down and you're creating mission and company values, and sometimes you're like, oh, I just got to make sure I make payroll next week, right? You're making sure that, if we don't get that plant open, all of this goes to hell. But at the same time, if you don't do those things as we grow companies, right? If we don't look at those things, in the moments, those quiet moments when we're really doing the real heavy lifting, you don't really notice it, but that's where the value of those conversations come in, right? You've got to, deliver on this week's needs, and B, really continue to look long term. And that's the hard one for people to understand, is as you're doing it, people, are like, well, why are you guys stopping and having a leadership meeting and sitting and talking about your rocks or the things you got to grow, or all this stuff? But those are the practices that ultimately make a long-term company viable, right? So where in the beginning we understand our values, our core ways of operating together, knowing that without operating this way, we'll get taken out somewhere. If we don't behave this way as a company, if we don't create the value in the relationships that we have this way, somewhere along the way, one of those misbehaviors are going to take us out, right? Those are the stuff that ultimately impact companies that end up in papers with, doing stuff that are unethical, or ideas that don't serve the people they work with, or the behaviors they have as an employer. You're like, look, you can't. You have got to do these. We have to practice these principles into all of our affairs. Like literally,
there's certainly that piece of it. I think there's there's the. I wouldn't say the other side, right? There's the opportunity side of that. Kind of, you spoke to the risk, which is we need, the whole idea with a startup is that you're freeing people of the shackles of bureaucracy. You're getting a small group of people together to accomplish things that most people would look around and say, this is impossible. Like, you can't get that done, right? And that takes that takes a level of sort of teamwork and sense of mission and purpose that is critical. And we'll have times throughout the year where it's happening right now, where our engineering team is we have certain deadlines we're trying to hit. Supply chains have been extended, And so the pressure is on to sort of get stuff ordered way sooner than, we might have had to order it a year ago or 2 years ago. And that's just increased the intensity. And it's they're pulling together in ways that make me really proud in order to make that happen, because we need them to. And so yeah, and there's going to be more of that, right? We'll sort of give them a break when that's done, and then there'll be the next one. So it's that's just part and parcel of small groups of people doing things that are seemingly impossible, or at least impossible in pace. So
I honor you.
That's enjoyed it.
I honor you. I feel I can feel that, right? Like I can literally feel what you do every day, keeping everybody going in that same direction when the world tries us every single day. I honor you for the journey that you're on. The work you guys are doing is great. It's impacting the world. It's a way bigger conversation than a lot of people, are willing to have. And the work you do is wonderful. Keep it up. The big idea is it's inspiring, right? If you're a young guy and you're out there, a young woman out there, and you've got these ideas, look, this is where it happens, right? Being brave and bold and going out there. Rahul, you're a great example of being bold and being brave and taking the group and helping everybody, see that and moving them forward, because I know what it takes. I've been there, and on the days when your team thinks they can do it, on the days when they don't think they can do it, and the world's trying you every day, keeping them, focused, and that's great. So thank you very much for being on the show. As you continue to develop, I would love to do more and more, show off more about what's going on over there. I want to honor the work that you and your team are doing. I'd love to highlight the work that they're up to. So anytime you want to come back on the show, anytime you want to highlight something that you're doing, I'd like to honor your group in doing that. And I'm grateful for having you on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and we'll look forward to, maybe showing off what we've got in Alabama once that's up and running. And obviously, if you've got listeners who are interested in this product, happy to reach out and chat.
All right. So if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best place for them to catch up with you?
So if you go to our website, there's a email address to register interest, and it's a small team, so that very quickly gets to the right people, whether it's me or our head of business development or our head of product. So that's probably the easiest thing to do.
All right, great. Eric,
that's www.carbonbuilt.com.
Eric and our team will put that down in the links down below. And Rahul, again, I honor you and the path you're doing. I look forward to a lot more conversations. You are a great guest to have on. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks for joining us. My name is Anthony Amunategui, always looking for people to bring insight into the industry, finding ways to inspire people to have amazing careers in the development world. If you liked our podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. If you really liked our podcast, make sure you hit the little bell. Thanks again for listening. Please share it with your friends.